Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are in Tacoma, Washington to see the Gary McKay Collection. This is a wonderful collection of cars. In fact, if you've been watching the Vintage Vehicle Show for several years, then you know we were here about 5 years ago, and we're back again. It's such a great collection. We want to see how it's developed. And who is responsible for this? Mr. Gary McKay. How you doing, Gary?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Tell us about this. I've been here before. It was amazing then. It's amazing now. How did this all come about?
Well, I've been a car nut since I could walk, and always had an interest. The collection is dominantly Ford, but I'm a car guy, so I like anything that's nice. I have some Chevs, I have Chrysler product. And probably in the last 15, 16 years, the collection really evolved to where it is today. And that's about it.
The facility itself, the brick walls and the lighting and everything, what's the history of the building?
The building was built originally by the city of Tacoma. Kind of ironic, it was vehicle maintenance and small transformers. And then I started working on the building in '92 and restored it to what you see today. And it was an excellent building. It's built really stout. I knew I was going to have cars and vehicles up here, and I had it engineered, and you need 50 pounds per square foot for car loading, and it came in at 125 pounds per foot, so it'll hold a tank up here.
Yeah,
so.
All right. Well, speaking of tanks, there are no tanks here, but you have some pretty cool cars. Can we take a look at some of them?
Sure.
All right, let's go. I love Mustangs, and I think the best looking Mustang ever made is a 1969 Fastback, which you happen to have maybe the finest example I've ever seen.
Well, I appreciate that. This is a 69 Mach 1 428 SCJ Drag Pac car. Shaker hood, 4-speed car. It was a 4.5-year restoration, starting with a 37,000-mile car that was all original paint. Actually hadn't been on the road since about 1976. Sold new in North Carolina, stayed in North Carolina all its life. And basically the car is all NOS, and as much as possible anyway. And some of the interior parts and things are original because it was that nice. And it was never on the road long enough, like I said, to have any corrosion or anything of that. Fortunately, it was never wrecked, and it was never a drag car either, where most of these Drag Pac SCJ cars were drag cars, and quarters were cut up and bigger tires and holes drilled here and there for different lines and things. This car never had any of that, so it was a true survivor that I just was really fortunate to find.
A lot of your collection here, most of your collection is Ford, not all, but most of it, and a lot of Mustangs in here, and a lot of specific era of Mustang. What about, I mean, the simple answer, and probably the main answer is you like them, but what is it about the Mustangs that flipped your switch back in 1970 or 65?
Well, when they first came out, I liked them in 64 and a half, 65, 6 and 7. But actually the 67, when the 67 Fastback came out with the 390 motor, that's when they made the car a little bit larger to accept the big block, they called it. Prior to that, they were all small block 289s. That's the one that really turned me on. From then, it's 67 to 70 are my favorite Mustangs.
Yeah, me too. As the Mustangs evolved from the 64 and a half to 70, that era, they looked very similar, but there were actually a lot of changes. I know some people may look at a 66 and not know it from a 68, but people that do know that kind of stuff know the differences. Well, a 69 and a 70 look pretty similar. Tell us what's the difference in those?
Yeah, the big difference between a 69 and a 70, you're right, the bodies are basically the same body shell, but a 69 has 4 headlights and has the side scoops, where a 70 has single headlights and no scoops. And the medallion on the roof, the pillar roof there on the sail panel, a 70 doesn't have that either.
They did a good job of muscling them up, but also classing them up a little bit. I mean, the medallion is a good example of that. They look like they cost a few bucks, not just your basic vehicle here. And when they decided to, when they put this in and did the flip up back here and all, do Do you notice, I mean, I don't know what kind of high-speed kind of stuff you do with these cars or have done in the past, but are there some of these styling cues that maybe it's questionable what they really did as far as functional? It was more a visual thing. Do you notice any differences in driving some of these cars?
No, not to that. I mean, I don't drive them to that
You don't go 200 miles an hour?
No. And I'm not sure. I think it's more for style than it was aerodynamics. There probably was some aerodynamics to this built-in spoiler in the back based on this roof line. I'm sure it did something. As far as actual being in a wind tunnel testing type thing.
You don't have a wind tunnel here?
No, I don't have that here.
Everything else. 71, they started making the change that they made, which maybe wasn't all that great for a period of time.
Yeah.
And your cutoff here on your Mustangs is 70?
It's 70.
Okay, well, let's take a look at a 70 and compare it to this one. So here's a 1970. What you pointed out, the differences are there, but tell us about this car specifically.
This is a 1970 Mach 1 428 Cobra Jet, 4-speed car. Shaker car, again, is like the 69. As I was telling you, the 70 has single headlights, no scoops, and then no stripe on the side with the Mach 1 name, but they added a lower rocker panel assembly that has the Mach 1 in it.
So if you had a Mach 1, that's what you had.
That's what you had as a 70 Mach 1.
It obviously has the shaker hood. You got a big hole here. Tell us about that.
Well, the reason they call them a shaker hood was the assembly is all bolted to the motor, and it's independent of the hood. So when the engine's idling, it shakes, so that it moves a little bit there. So,
at what point is, I mean, the more shake, the better? What do you think? Is there a relationship to how cool you're feeling in this thing?
You don't want too much shake. You don't want it beating the hood to death.
Yeah.
So you want it to be reasonable.
So if you have bare metal along here, you know you've gone too far.
You've gone too far, or your hood doesn't fit. So.
And then the right here, I know this is it keeps the hood from flying up at 150 miles an hour, but
that was actually part of the Mach 1 in 69 and 70. In 69, they had hood pins with the cable and pins, and in 70 they went to the turn downs. They really didn't need either one because they both have the factory latch, was a safety latch. And personally, I don't like either one of them. I think they hurt the hood, and they're kind of.
Well, what you ought to do, you could put hot on that one and cold on this one.
I could do that. Yeah, that'd work.
Speaking of hot, next door here we have something that's really hot. Let's take a look at that.
Okay.
Boss 429, magic word, magic numbers, impressive.
This is 70 Boss 429. This is an all-original car, Calypso Coral, same color as the Cobra Jet Calypso Coral. This is a 12,000-mile all-original car, totally unrestored, original paint, original tires, original everything. True survivor as a Boss 9. A lot of them are run hard in drag cars and things like that, and this car is a true, untouched, unmolested car. They built the Boss 429 to sanction the motor for NASCAR in 69 and 70, and then that was the end of it. NASCAR outlawed the Hemi, but Boss 429 is Ford's Hemi. And I think now everybody's catching on to that now. The price of these cars have gone way up, but like a Hemi Cuda, this is Ford's Hemi, and they did real well with it. But like I said, NASCAR outlawed the Hemi program in 70, so the cars went away. So they only built them 2 years.
Gary, earlier you were telling me about how this car ended up being one of one. Tell me the story there.
It's a 67 GTA K-code Mustang convertible. And the K stands for High Performance 289. That was the last year that Ford used the K motor. And this car is actually one of one because there was 472,000 67 Mustangs produced. 44,000 of them were convertibles. 50 of them had the Hypo K motor. 16 of them had the automatic transmission behind them. 3 of them were triple black, but 1 of them had the bench seat with a fold-down armrest, which was a very rare option in a Mustang, and that's this car, so it's one of one.
One of one, that's amazing. The GTA, and it's the GTA model, but what is a GTA? What's that stand for?
GTA was the automatic, GT was the 4-speed.
Okay. Convertibles and fastbacks, they're kind of everything equal. They're kind of equal, aren't they, as far as values these days?
Yeah, I think so. I think in 67, the 67 fastback has really come on in the last couple of years, and of course driven the 67 Shelby into the hemisphere. And So I'd say the 67 convertibles and fastbacks are probably running pretty close, where before a convertible was worth more money.
Mm-hmm. Your collection here is phenomenal, but you have one car here that's probably on the pecking order, is not in the league of these cars, but I love it. I just love that, that little sedan delivery over in the corner. Can we take a look at that?
Sure.
All right. Gary, this certainly isn't the highest buck car in your collection, but boy, this one tugs at my heart. A 65 Falcon Sedan Delivery. Mm-hmm. Unusual.
Yeah, there was about 650 of those built. And this one here is kind of a unique story. It was sold new to the state of Washington Department of Fisheries, and it was assigned to a supervisor, so it was never in the motor pool. And they had it for, and I think they had a policy they traded cars every 65,000 or 3 years. Well, this never got 65,000 until I think it was 1981. It went to a state auction, and it was a 289 two-barrel automatic factory air car. And so when I bought it, I kind of had the idea that maybe I was going to put alt-electric on it, and that'd be my car to run around with. And one thing led to another, and as usual, I tore it all apart and did a rotisserie. And I decided that you couldn't get a hypo Falcon. I've heard and I've read some articles that possibly there was some built out of Canada, but for the basic production of the Falcons, you could get a hypo in a Mustang and a Fairlane, but not in a Falcon. So I decided if I was going to do it, I was going to make it a factory hypo. So it's got the right 9-inch rear end, it's got the factory disc brakes, and build a hypo motor for it, which was higher horsepower than a hypo is 271 horse. This is 340 horse. And it's kind of built with a Cobra theme. It's got Cobra intake and pan and valve covers and air cleaner, and then on the inside it's got the Cobra embroidered in the floor mat. And then a good friend of mine gave me the correct Falcon Sprint tack for it, so I put the tack in it where the factory tack was. So just kind of added some of those things. The color of it's the factory color. It was called Twilight Turquoise. And then it was kind of that brown they had back then, so we matched the interior to the outside, and it turned out really well. These were cheap, economical vehicles, so there wasn't a lot of time spent on the quality, the body and fit and finish, and there's hours and hours been spent on it. So now when you look down the sides of it, all the lines, which there's several of them on these cars, all line up perfect, the top's perfectly straight, and it was a real good car to begin with. It had never been hit and didn't have any rust in it, and so it made it easy to make what it is, but it was challenging to get that body to look like that.
A beautiful 1967 Fairlane. Great cars. People that wanted a Ford back then, wanted a hot Ford, what do you think made them decide to do a Fairlane instead of a Mustang, or a Mustang instead of a Fairlane?
Well, I think probably to go to the Fairlane and give them a little more room, you know, obviously. Bigger trunk. The XL still had bucket seats in this model Fairlane, but you had more room in the back seat, just probably for maybe they had a family and wanted a hot rod at the same time.
Yeah.
This car is extremely rare. It's a 67 factory 427 R code Fairlane, which of this model there was only 72 of them produced. It's actually one of one, like the 67 black Mustang was. There was 255,000 of these built, and 14,000 of them were the XL model. 72 of them had the 427 8B motor. 9 of them were black. 7 of them had the black vinyl interior, and one of them had a tinted windshield, and it was this car.
Wow.
So, but these were extremely rare cars. There wasn't a lot of them.
The performance on this compared to a 67 Mustang with comparable running gear, who's going to win straight away?
Well, of course, you couldn't get the 427 and the Mustang. The largest was the GT 390, and then this car would definitely outperform that.
Mm-hmm. And on the Boulevard Cruisers back then, probably the Mustang held a little more prestige with the guys on the street, you think?
Yeah, the 67 390 Mustang, some of them ran pretty strong, some were okay. They didn't set any records. Some of the GM pieces there were stronger.
Mm-hmm. You've got a GTA next to it here. Looks pretty good.
Yeah, that's a 66 GTA 390 convertible. That's a fairly rare car too, not as rare as a 427, but wasn't a lot of the 390 convertibles. And the 66 was a big change in the Fairlane. It was the first year for a GT model, first year for a big block, first year for a convertible. Huge changes in styling too. I know everybody's got different opinions, but a 63, 64 Fairlanes were nice looking cars. 65 was just homely as hell, and then 66 and 7 were winners again. And then after that, I think they kind of deteriorated, but 66 and 7 and 4s and 3s were really good looking cars.
Next to it, you have a Fairlane 500 that's, it's not flashy looking like this, but I bet you going straight down the road, it's going to be the one that gets to the end first.
That's a 66 Fairlane 500, two-door hardtop, factory 427 car. This is really extremely rare. There was 57 of these produced. This is number 53. And this is truly probably my favorite muscle car that I own. And this is all numbers matching, date codes and things. I bought this out of South Bend, Indiana. A fellow by the name of Jerry Briskowski restored the car, did a wonderful job on it. And
they did some lightweight things at the factory on these.
Yeah, these cars had no sound in there, no insulation, no radio, no clock. They put heaters in them, which was kind of odd, but they did do that. They were all built out of the Atlanta plant. They were all identical. You couldn't have any different options. They were one way, and that's the way you got it. And the only fiberglass piece on these was the hood. And it was a lift-off hood, non-hinged hood. And I made these just for display so you could see the motor. And in '67, they offered this package to the public, the black Fairlane, and the hood was a hinged hood, and this hood was an optional hood then in '67. But these are really a pretty car. They look like a race car sitting still.
Mm-hmm. So you were telling me earlier you were just out of being a teenager when you got this one.
I was 20 years old. I've had it 36 years. It's a '67 fastback 390 automatic car. I've had it 36 years. It's got 52,000 original miles on it. Never been smoked in. Original paint. Everything's original on it except the tires. Used it as a family car and retired it. It had, I think it had 32,000 miles on it when I got it, and it's got 52 now. So,
not a lot.
36 years. It's went 20,000 miles.
409 Chevrolet. How did that happen? What's that doing in here?
Well, I kind of wanted a GM piece and a Mopar piece to round out the whole 60 muscle deal where Ford and Chrysler and Chevrolet were competing it. And so I was looking for a 62 409. They're really hard to come by. There's quite a few fakes out there. There's a lot more of them out there today than were ever made by Chevrolet. But I stumbled onto this one actually down at Chaz Martin's show. This fella brought it in with a race car. He's kind of known in the area as kind of the 62 Mr. 409. And I'd heard that he had this car. It was a flawless, it won the Chevrolet Nationals twice. But I heard that he would never sell the car. And him and I got into a conversation talking about the cars and things, and he informed me that he was selling everything here and kind of retiring and moving down to Arizona, and said this car could become available after the Chevrolet convention. And so him and I got together, and I looked the car over thoroughly, and we put a deal together. And what makes this car stand out, separate it from the rest of the 409s, this is really extremely rare. It's got the Z11 409 motor in it, which in '62 there was just a few of those motors built, and they were all dealer installed. You couldn't get a Z11 from the factory in '62. And in '63 you could order the Z11 race car, but this motor's stamped to the car, and it's just a drop dead piece. I really lucked out when I found it.
Well, you have another Chevrolet. I mean, two Chevrolets here. I don't know.
Oh, something might be going wrong.
Yeah, there's some Ford viewers that are watching right now. They're a little concerned. But let's take a look at that.
All right.
All right. A 1955 Chevrolet, pretty traditional, well-loved car.
Yeah, I always had a soft spot for these cars. My first car was a '55 BelAir two-door post, turquoise and white. So I'd always kind of kept my eye peeled for one throughout the years, and I stumbled onto this car about 6-7 years ago. It was advertised in the DuPont registry. Actually, a friend of mine spotted it in there and showed it to me. It was down in San Francisco, and I called the guy, and he explained the car to me, and he'd bought it from the original owner who'd had it since from 1955 to 1990. And he bought it and did a 5-year restoration on it, and impeccable restoration. It scored 998 out of 1,000 at the Chevrolet Nationals in California.
What cost 2 points? Why didn't it get 1,000?
I think there was something about overspray on the motor wasn't quite what they wanted. Bottom line is they probably didn't want to give it a perfect score.
Yeah.
When we took the car apart to put the frame under it, we had to pretty much disassemble it. It was truly like working on a brand new '55. It was a California car, so it never had any corrosion. So that was, that really makes the difference. But the quality of the restoration, a fellow by the name of Bill Gamblin did the restoration on it. Every detail was flawless. Every nut, every bolt was the correct one. Every place that needed sealer in the doors and the door panels, everything was exactly the way it's supposed to be. And one of the fellows that worked on it had worked on a lot of these cars over the years, and say never taken one apart that even compared to it.
Oh, it's as fine a one as I've ever seen. Your collection here also includes beautiful neon signs and gas pumps, which is a wonderful part of the hobby. How did you get into that? And
I started collecting gas pumps when I was getting started to put the museum together, and I'd probably had 12, 14 of them or so. And a friend of mine that worked for Associated Petroleum, he came by one day and said, "Can I get involved in helping you with some of this?" And I said, "Well, yeah, we can do a little of that." Well, he took off, and so we're partners on the gas pumps memorabilia in here, and that's how that evolved. So.
And I have a few pumps and neon at home, and I'm sure you can remember when they were junk, when people threw them away.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So.
And it's funny you say that, because when I started collecting these pumps, we bought them restored. There's enough time in a lifetime to do all this. So, and I was paying reasonable money for them, but it was still money. $18 to $2,000 to $2,500 a piece back then, years ago. And I got to looking at them, and thinking, this stuff ever going to be worth anything? You can't even find it now. Everything I bought's either doubled or tripled.
Right.
And but who would have known?
Yeah. Well, Gary, I want to thank you for the invitation to come shoot your collection again. It is breathtaking. You are a perfect curator and gentleman for taking us around. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right.
Glad to have you here again.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for watching the show this week. We had a great time at the Gary McKay Museum in Tacoma, Washington. What a collection. Next week, we're going to have something just as interesting. So until then, we'll see you. Bye-bye.